Hi everyone, this is Amanda Smithson and my functional area presentation is on the financial aid office. So what does financial aid do? Obviously, financial aid is there to help students find the money they need to pay for college. Many of us have had experience with financial aid in our lives, whether it be by getting grants or loans to help pay for our undergraduate or graduate educations. It also is responsible for implementing the policies and regulations of the state and federal agencies that award this money. A lot of people don't realize that the federal financial aid laws require that colleges to have drug and alcohol awareness programming. It also requires that the male students who apply for financial aid are registered for the Selective Service. In addition, you have to provide voter registration information. These are just a few of the things that don't really seem like they have anything to do with financial aid, but are required by the regulatory agencies. In addition, financial aid is there to provide financial management education to our students, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about loans. So for this, I interviewed Dora Sims. She's our Director of Financial Aid at Alvin Community College. She's been there for over 30 years. She started working in the financial aid office as a student worker when she went back to school after having her daughter. She finished her bachelor's degree and her master's degree while working in the financial aid office, and she's just worked her way up to become the director. So what type of aid is available? Many of us know about a lot of these already. The federal Pell Grants program, that's free money that's available to students. They don't have to pay it back. It's just for undergraduate students. Hopefully it helps them kind of pay for everything that they need. Then there are also loans. So there are subsidized loans which have a lower interest rate, mostly go to undergraduate students. And then there are unsubsidized loans, which can go to any student, and they have a higher interest rate, and they're not as user friendly, I would say, as a subsidized loan. Scholarships, money that's available through the institution, through employers, through service organizations. There's all kinds of scholarships available. The state of Texas also provides a lot of money to students. There's something called the Texas Public Education Grant Program. There's also the Hazelwood Act, which provides money to veterans and their dependents. And then there's grants. Sometimes the college is lucky enough to win grants that provide workforce education or other types of education to specific populations. The financial aid office helps to implement those grants and make sure that the appropriate students are being served. So in addition to awarding aid, the financial aid office helps our students who are currently incarcerated in one of our local prisons. We have a prison program where we offer several different certificate and degree programs. Those students are not necessarily eligible for the standard types of aid that a non-incarcerated student would get. So the financial aid office helps them to find the money they need to pay for classes. The FAFSA is the free application that students have to fill out in order to apply for financial aid. It's a very long form. It asks lots of very detailed questions, and it can be very overwhelming for a student, especially because if the student is under the age of 24, in most cases, they need the information of the parent to do it, and it's their tax information from the previous year. So they're there to help that student and that parent fill out that form. They also are there to make sure the forms were filled out correctly. One number off can mean a big difference for a student. So they do a lot of time in the summers verifying forms just to make sure that they're accurate and that the student is going to be eligible to receive as much aid as possible. The satisfactory academic progress is basically that the student takes a certain number of class hours, that they maintain a certain GPA to be continuing to make progress through their education. If a student isn't doing this, then they could lose their aid or they could be put on probation. So every semester after classes are finished, the financial aid office has to check every student's grade to make sure that they're still in good standing. Student loans are a hot button issue right now because they're expensive, and several of us probably have them. I know I have student loans, and it's something that's hard not to worry about. So they provide counseling to students. Some of it is mandated by the federal and state government. Some of it they just provide to help students understand what they're getting into when they take out a loan. This may not be typical, but we've had a lot of instances where students will take out the maximum loan that they possibly can, and they spend it on things that are not related to their education. Cars, handbags, expensive jewelry. We try to encourage our students to only take what they need to live and to go to school and not incur that debt, because it is debt. It's something that has to be paid back, and depending on the type of loan, it could be at a pretty high interest rate. We also have a student worker program, just like many other colleges, and all the student workers have to be approved by the financial aid office. For one thing, they all have to have a criminal background check. That's just a standard policy to make sure that the people who are working on campus are safe to be there. And then also, a lot of times, students who are working on campus are doing part of their work as part of their financial aid. So they may receive a certain amount of financial aid, and they could earn even more through their salary they earn on campus. So financial aid verifies that information. If a student is needing employment verification, or that they're maintaining certain grades for a scholarship for a job, they can also get that through financial aid. And I said much more because they do a lot more. For example, if a student wants to drop a class or add a class and they're on financial aid, it has to be reviewed by their financial aid advisor, because dropping a class could mean that a student is not maintaining their satisfactory academic progress. Also, students who are on financial aid often need to be on a specific degree plan. They have to have a degree plan on file, and they have to be sticking to it. So if we have a student, for example, who's a business major who wants to take a class in pottery, that might not be on their degree plan. So we need to help that student to find a class that is on the degree plan that does fill that criteria that they need for their education or their financial aid. So this is the basic breakdown of the financial aid office at Alvin Community College. We have the director of financial aid, and under her is a loan counselor who handles all the loans. She reviews all the applications. She works with all the students. Then we have the financial aid specialist. She's the money person. She makes sure that all of the money is distributed properly. She works with the business office to make sure checks are cut, etc. That's her job. She's the money person. Underneath them are our financial aid advisors, and they're the boots on the ground. They're the ones who meet directly with students. They're the ones who verify their FAFSAs. They're the ones that are counseling them on what classes to take and how to get started. So financial aid is part of student services, so therefore at Alvin it goes directly to the Vice President of Student Services. That's the supervisor. At other institutions, it might vary to be under the bursar's office, the chief financial officer, or even the vice president of finance. So financial aid is more than just students. A lot of times they have to work with parents because of the FAFSA. Because the form requires the parent's information, it's important that the parent understands the form and how to fill it out properly. So there's a lot of time spent working directly with parents. They also work with almost every other department within student services. They have to verify grades with the registrar's office. They have to assist advising when it comes to helping students register for class or drop class. Everyone benefits when a student does well in school. And when they fail, nobody benefits. So we work with the Learning Resources Department to make sure that the student is getting the help they need to be successful academically. The business office is obvious because that's who cuts the checks. That's who makes sure that the awards are done. Those are the ones who credit the money to students' accounts. Administrators come into play a lot because our president has to approve our financial aid. She has to review the audits, all those kinds of things. So the financial aid office and the administration of the college have to work together a lot just to checks and balances. Faculty is another big part. Students and faculty are kind of, let's see, what's the right way of saying this? Sometimes faculty is not necessarily concerned with the student's financial aid status as much as a financial aid administrator is. So the financial aid staff has to work with faculty to make sure that the student is going to class, that the student is doing well in the class. If a student gets an I, for example, and they're on financial aid, the faculty and the financial aid office have to work together to get that I resolved so the student's award can either be processed or put on hold. In addition, community members. Financial aid does a lot of stuff in the community to make sure that students know that it's available. College seems like it is just unattainable for a lot of families, especially if, for example, they are dreamers, as we call them, students who have parents who are not legal residents. There are a lot of financial aid options available to those students that they might not know about. So the financial aid office spends a lot of time in the community educating people about what's available to help them pay for college. So student success is very important, because if a student isn't successful, they're going to become something called return to Title IV, which means that they have to pay back all or a portion of the money that they took from the financial aid department, from Pell Grants, whatever, loans, and they have to return it. And when a student gets into that cycle, it's very hard to get out of it. So if a student fails 3 classes and needs to pay back $500, but they're on financial aid, chances are they don't have $500. So we lose that student. They have debt to the college and they have no education. So it's very, very important that financial aid has a vested interest in student success. The financial aid director made the comment that we're always trying to work with faculty to get the students in class and then keep them there, because one of the biggest reasons students aren't successful is they just don't go to class. So financial aid is always trying to encourage faculty to take roll, to let them know if they have a student who isn't coming to class. So you want to work in the financial aid office. Well, these are some of the things you need to have. Obviously, you need to have personal skills. You've got to understand the federal and state regulations. There's a lot of things that change all the time, so you have to be continuously updating your education. Basic math. You need to be able to work some of the softwares. And probably the most important thing is that you have to have a thick skin. Financial aid is a love-hate relationship with students. Anytime that you're talking about somebody's money and their future, it can become very heated very quickly. So financial aid has to work really hard with students who feel very passionately, who could be frustrated with the system, who just don't understand what's happening. Something that they always say is, we don't make the rules, we just implement them. And that can be hard for a lot of people to understand. In addition, the FAFSA form can be very difficult. The biggest challenge, though, is getting students to go to class. Once we get them in the door and we get them awarded, we want them to stay in school and be successful. So the rewards, obviously, building relationships with students is always a plus. Seeing them get through and be successful with those classes, and it all comes back down to that short walk across the stage. Walking across the stage at graduation makes it all worthwhile when you've seen how you've taken a student and you've given them the resources that they need to be successful. So how do we measure success in financial aid? Obviously, we look at the number of awards across all types of aid. We want to be awarding as much as we possibly can. We also want to make sure we're awarding as much money as we possibly can to our students. Financial aid is heavily scrutinized. They have to be audited every year. We need to make sure that our accounts match what the government has, what the state has, and that's very, very important, because if that money doesn't add up, it's got to be paid back somehow. And student success, that's our measure across student services altogether, is we want our students to be successful. We want them to graduate. We want them to transfer. We want them to be active members of our community. So that is the 13-minute explanation of financial aid. I look forward to the discussion that we'll have about this. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this.